What we're going to talk about here is a little technical, and it's called tension, continuity, and bias, or TCB. Whenever you create animation in Toom Studio and in a lot of animation packages, behind the scenes you're defining curves known as splines, and splines pretty much guide the motion path. So what I'm going to show you here is I'm going to create a motion path for this ball. I have a peg here for the ball, and I'm going to go to the first frame, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to add a keyframe. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my transform tool. I'm going to go to frame 10. Well, actually, let me go to frame 1 first and put the ball down on the ground, which would be great. Then I'll go to frame 10. And then, of course, using the transform tool, I'm going to move the ball. And you'll see that we have a path here. Now I'm going to go to frame 20, and I'm going to put the ball back down on the ground. And we've created a curve known as a spline. Now, you normally don't see this when you press your preview button. For example, I'll go to play, and I'll go ahead to quick preview. And by the way, this is the same as going to the return key. I just wanted to show you a different way to get a preview. So we're able to generate this preview of this animation. And like I said before, you can't see it, but behind the scenes, you're actually creating splines which define the path of this curve. Now what we're going to do is we're going to actually change the way this spline works by adjusting tension, continuity, and bias. And I'll explain what each one of these parameters mean. So let me go ahead and move this over a little bit, the properties. And I'm going to choose the motion tool down here in my scene planning tools. And when I do that, I can actually see the points that make up this spline. If I select the one in the center, all of a sudden I can see in my properties I have this motion point tab. And I have my tension, continuity, and bias. Now, what tension will do is it will literally control the amount of curvature in this curve. For example, if I go to 1, if I go ahead and type 1 here in this field, I create a linear spline. It's going linear now. It's 2 straight lines. And if I preview this, you'll see that it just jumps up in the air and bounces back down in a very linear fashion. There's no other way to really say it except for that it doesn't really curve at all. So it goes up, it comes down. There's no curve. Now, if I go ahead and enter a negative tension, a negative one, I get a very, very smooth curve, and I can go ahead and preview this as well. So I'll go ahead and do another preview. And we get a very smooth floating feel to the ball. Let me move this over just one more time here. We get a very, very smooth feel. So it's floating and it's back down. And this is a way you can control the ease in and ease out of your animation as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this back to 0. The continuity pretty much will do almost the same thing, and it will change the curve so that it can be discontinuous. So instead of having a nice smooth curve, if I go to a negative tension, let's see what happens. -1, and we get a linear spline like the tension. But if I go to a +1, we have a little bit of a dip here, so we break the continuity of the curve itself. And I'll do a preview of this as well. Let me play that again. So we get a little crazy little dip in the ball. I'll go ahead and put this back on 0. I know some of your heads are hurting right now because when we get to the math, the fun stuff that we love to do, the art, the creativity goes away, and we have to switch to the left side of our brains, and it hurts our head. After this lesson, I'm getting a cup of coffee. Now what bias will do is it will push the curve beyond the keyframe itself, so it's going to look a little weird. Now I'm going to go to a negative value for the bias. And as you see, we have a smooth curve here, and we exaggerate the curve on this angle, so we can get this nice little dip here. I'll go ahead and do a preview of that. So it's kind of like a roller coaster. You know, you have the car going up the track, and then it comes down fast. And I'll go ahead and put a +1, and we change it on the opposite direction. So we get this linear line here and a nice smooth one here. So this is what the tension, the continuity, and bias, also known as the TCB, can do for you when you want to adjust the flow of your animation. Because what you're doing is you're literally changing the actual path or the spline that's controlling the animation itself.